Shalom, and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malman in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Cheyenne. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky on Sheikh Chesed, New York City. We have an amazing Parsha. Parsha Hayyei, Sara. It doesn't get better than this. It doesn't get better than this. Although, next
At
week.
least for this week.
No, it does get better than this, but this is still pretty good.
This is a great Parsha. I'll tell you why. It's got a great story. It's got a love story in it. It's got death. It's got love. It's got marriage. It's got everything in life, okay? And it's even got the next chapter for Abraham. Let's get right into it. We start out this Parsha with the death of Sara. We're very, very sad about that. Abraham is also very sad about it, depending on how you read it. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara v'liv kota. Okay, gentlemen, I have a problem. Why is he not with his wife? Where is he? What's going on here? Can you tell me why Abraham is far away? Go ahead, Jeremy.
Because famously, this parasha is the it's what we call smichut parshiot. The two stories appended one to another in the Torah. We have to read it midrashically as they're connected. So the last parasha ended with the story of the Akedah of Isaac. The immediate thing that follows is the death of Sarah. So we midrashically read that when Sarah hears what Abraham has done, she passes from this world. It kills her. And so at the end of the Akedah, Abraham returns to Beersheba. He can't go back to his wife after everything that has happened. They're alienated. They're estranged after this devastating thing. So he's in Beersheba, she's in Hebron, and he has to come here from his I don't know, his country house, or she sent his sorry carcass back to the country house and told him, don't you darken my door.
So I looked up on the Google Maps before, and it's about a 14-hour walk. I mean, and that's today. It's at least a day's journey, maybe 2 days' journey. He's far away. There's no getting around this, and it leads me also to believe that there's something estranged in this relationship. That and even the terms vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara v'liv kota. Abraham comes to lispod, which is translated as to mourn her. But we use the word lispod is to give a hesped, to give a eulogy, to eulogize her, and v'liv kota. And the commentators, some of the commentators kind of pounce on this and they say, normally people cry before they do the public eulogizing. And so I'm led to believe that he does it in the reverse, because whatever he's mourning in public. He's mourning to show everyone the loss. He's maybe crying in private, but it's a public mourning. And this puts us into the next, scene, because he's got to find a grave for her. Barry, you want to pick up on this?
I have to jump in here for two reasons. First of all, I think that a lot of times we confuse what we do with what people have always done. And we know a lot of things. I don't know that we know all that much about how people mourn in the ancient world. But Nachum Sarn, in his commentary on Breshit, has a fascinating comment on this word by Yavo, and he says the JPS New Translation is proceeded, and he notes that the Hebrew verb to come may have the sense of preparation for action when used in conjunction with another verb. So that we don't have to understand it spatially, that he's coming from one place to another, but he's getting ready to mourn.
He's getting ready to mourn.
And
well, that would be interesting.
Mourn,
yeah.
He has to bury her, which is
that would be interesting. Also, if we can make a little bit of a psychological drush on it, sometimes the mourning is just spontaneous and it comes out of the heart with no trigger. And sometimes actually putting yourself in the mourning rituals awakens the feelings.
Yes. Okay, so if we want to ask, what do you think his state of mind is here? And I will ask you both to weigh in on this, because the very next scene is I think a rather sophisticated negotiation between him and and the local Don, the local, I mean, how would you characterize Ephron the Hittite? Landowner,
Yeah, I
developer.
think a local thug.
He's a local thug, right?
So I think that Abraham is confused or perplexed. And I think we have to imagine, I think correctly, that Abraham is semi-nomadic. He's not settled. But now when someone dies, he has to decide what to do. And he realizes, he's taken this long journey. He's come with his family to Canaan from his homeland. And now he actually needs a piece of the land. He can't be traveling. He needs an anchor in the city, in this piece of land.
I disagree with. I think he's very shrewd here. I think he's clear-headed. He's not, and this is why I also am led to believe that he's very sad that she dies, but he's not completely overwhelmed, broken, distraught. He's and of course at the end of the parsha we'll see that he picks up and gets on with his life too, which we'll talk about. But this is a guy. Yeah, this event has happened. He knows he has to take care of it. He didn't prearrange a funeral. He didn't go to, what's your funeral home in
Plaza Chapels.
He
Yeah.
didn't go there. He didn't buy a plot. It's irresponsible. Today we would say that, but he does it with a lot of clarity, with a lot of, it's a shrewd negotiation with a thug.
Well, but he possibly overpays.
Comes closer to the mic.
He possibly overpays.
Possibly.
I don't know if you think he's shrewd, then I think that we have to ask ourselves what we think the point of the story is. And the point of the story is the sale of the land. That
Okay.
This is going to be the first property that is Israelite or Hebrew property in the promised land.
Right.
And it's significant that it's Hebron, which
Yeah.
we know from later in the Bible is going to be the town of David.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeremy.
No. I think that it's what speaks to me about this passage is neither particularly the shrewdness nor Ephron's wiliness. Ephron does seem to swindle him out of a hell of a great deal, but there's a sort of a real poetic echo of human experience. What land do you really own in this world? Only the arba amot of your grave, right? You buy something, and this is where your bones. You are going to be part of the land, and I find this really profound. There's beautiful, deep agada in the mystical tradition about this being the gateway to. In the Zohar it says Viratz when Abraham goes last week. And the angels there, it says that Abraham Ratz El Habakar, he ran to the cattle, but it plays with the words and says Ratz El Kever, that he always wanted, the letters Bet Kuf Resh and Kuf Bet Resh, that he always wanted, he knew that this was the gateway to the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Chava were buried there. And he always wanted to be in that space between earth and paradise. And so that kind of drive to be in the grave, not that you want to die, but that you want to have the nexus point of living and eternity. I think this story is suffused, at least as Jews have read it, maybe not in the Tanakh itself, but as Jews have read it, to own your grave is to own your life, is to own your place as you pass from the world into eternity.
I want to add one other point. So when Abraham dies, it says by Yosef El Amav, he is gathered to his people, which is a bitui. It's an expression that he's now joining all the ancestors that have previously died. But here it also has an important geographical point because he is going to be buried next to Sara in the cave, and she is his person. And I think that this gives perhaps a nicer coda to their relationship than some of the things we've said previously.
I disagree with both of you. I think that he's ambivalent about it. He didn't prepare beforehand. He has to come from a distance. The fact that he has to do this at this point under duress is significant. The fact that he does it so well with clarity and without ambiguity as to who and how he owns the land, I think is the real kicker of the story. That he overpays for it in order that there would be no dispute whatsoever about his ownership, because they're willing to offer him, they're willing to say, "Oh, take a grave here, be my guest," and he does not want to have that doubt over him. He has already eyed the cave of Machpelah. He knows it because he lived in Elonei Moreh and Hebron before. He's scoped out the land. He knows exactly what he wants. He gets exactly what he wants. He's very shrewd. I would give him take off a star for not doing it ahead of time. And all our listeners and viewers, you should take care of this ahead of time. That's the point. All right, let's move on.
Otherwise, the cemetery people are going to upsell you.
Absolutely. Okay, so she's buried, and it's over, and then we get this lovely pasuk: Avraham zakein ba bayamim. Abraham is old. He is ba bayamim. How would you translate that? Advanced in years. Adonai berachat Avraham bakol. And God has blessed everything. God has blessed Abraham with everything, except for the fact that his wife just died.
Well, that was the blessing.
You think that was
that? But I think we have to. Last year, I think we spoke about this. But what I find curious this year is that now, after the death of Sarah, he's considered old.
Yeah.
But he was too old to have Isaac. But now he's really old, and he's going to be old again when he dies.
Okay.
And it makes one think that age here, or senioricity, whatever we want to call it, is really a state of mind. It's not something that attaches to the years. And it's said here because Abraham now knows that he has the sole powers of preparation for Isaac's future.
Yeah.
No one else to provide for Isaac.
Okay.
And that's the task that he's going to take up.
All right. So he has his trusted servant. Whether the servant is named Eliezer or not, it's a debate. We've been calling him Eliezer, but here he's unnamed. The unnamed servant. He has the servant in an oath, and the oath is Lo tikach isha livni mibnot hakna'ani. Don't take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites. Asher anochi yoshev bikirbo, among whom I am dwelling. Ki el artzi, go to my land. El moladati, my birthplace. Tilech, go there. V'lakachti isha livni liyitzchak, and get a wife for my son Isaac. And so he says, Hishamar lecha, swear by me, Penta shivat beni shama, do not send my son back there. Okay. So
there seems to be an intimation here that Abraham's not going to live to see Isaac married.
Interesting.
Right? Because otherwise, why would he have to tell the servant not to take a Canaanite woman for his wife?
That's interesting. That's an interesting. Let me ponder that. But as I ponder that, get Jeremy weigh in on this.
Okay, so
why doesn't he want a girl from Canaan, a Canaanite girl?
Well, clearly we will see later in the story of Isaac and Rebekah, they don't like the Canaanite girls. Esau marries them and they're just nothing but trouble. And the Bible obviously has a, generally speaking, negative attitude towards the local people in the land. There's like a lifelong rivalry, and Joshua is going to be commanded to kill every last one of them, and certainly one of the ugliest pieces in the Bible. But Abraham is clearly sufficiently old that there's he's not up to the journey, right? There's no chance that Abraham is going to make the journey himself. If Abraham's 99 when Isaac is born, and if Isaac is, working out some of the midrashic math, he's 37, so Abraham's about 136, 100. Sarah's 127.
He was 40 when he was married, Isaac. So Abraham's 140.
Well, Sarah's 127. Abraham was 9 years older than she is.
137.
So he's 137. He's going to live to 175. He has another 40 odd years in him, but he's not going to make this journey himself for sure. The thing that strikes out to me is that Isaac is incapable of making. I mean, what? How come Isaac is incapable of making the journey himself? And Abraham says, don't return my child there. Clearly, Abraham thinks that whatever Isaac will be exposed to he doesn't. I think that he thinks we've been on a covenantal journey. I know my son. I know what he can or can't do. Perhaps we say in the wake of the trauma of the Akedah, he has been unfit or he's unseated for his ability to do this. But the point is that Isaac is. I think that this is an indication of some weakness on his part. You can't take him back there. If he's going back there, he's not going to remain. He's not going to remain as part
Both
of.
of us disagree with you. Okay,
I
I'm
have
gonna
to disagree with you.
go ahead closer.
For this reason. And that is that the greatness of Isaac is that he never leaves Eretz Yisrael. Both his father and his son will leave Eretz Yisrael, and their experiences outside the land are not necessarily good. However we characterize Isaac, I think we have to take into account that it was his destiny to forever be within the land of Israel.
That's exactly what I'm saying is indicating a sense of weakness, which is to say that Abraham, that Jacob, that Joseph in his way, that Moshe in his way, David in his way, they're all going to experience exile and overcome those things. But certainly back in the patriarchal generation, Abraham and Jacob, they have to leave Eretz Yisrael. They have to go on, what Joseph Campbell calls, right, the hero's journey. The hero's journey marks them as a hero, that they have to overcome obstacles and return. What's his name? Ulysses has to come back. Odysseus has to come back from the exile, the battle. But Isaac can't do that. But you know who does? Rebecca does that. Rebecca is the character, just like Abraham and just like Jacob, who comes from Mesopotamia, has in some heroic measure to demonstrate her fitness with an act of great generosity, to leave behind the bad society and journey towards a good society. I basically think the three real ancestral superstars are Abraham, Rebecca, and Jacob.
Okay.
I've been disagreeing with you. I don't think that Abraham is frail, because we have plenty of evidence later on in the Parsha that he is quite virile and quite capable of living a good, full life. I want to put this out to you, not that he is incapable of going back. He doesn't want to go back. And the reason why he doesn't want to go back is he made a rupture between himself and that world. He does not want to go back to that world. And I get the feeling he also doesn't want to see those people again. His brother is way ahead of him in the nation building program. We have learned at the end of last week's Parsha that his brother is already well on to building up his own tribal structure. There are 12, kids from concubines and wives and whatever. Abraham's got nothing. Abraham's got nothing to show for it. And Abraham has the land, and Abraham has God. Of course, God, we have to talk about God, because God is not really in the picture here. But Abraham is zealous about staying in the land. He's zealous about maintaining his distance from his family. And there's a missing story here. Somebody said something to someone, and they don't talk anymore.
I have one thing in response to what you said, Jeremy, about the archetype of the hero's return, is that the experiences that Abraham...
Come close.
We're not hearing you.
The experiences that Abraham and Jacob have outside of the land are not the highlights of their lives. And in fact, we can argue they're the lowlights.
I'm saying it again because we can't hear you.
They're lowlights. In other words, when Abraham goes to Egypt and passes his wife off as his sister, we don't say, wow, Abraham, kol hakavod lecha. And when Jacob goes first to Padan Aram, to his uncle, and then to Egypt, we also have ambivalence about what he does.
And but I think that's part of the story. I think that's part of its
I understand that point, and I accept that point, but I also think part of the story is that Isaac doesn't do it not because he is weak, but it is part of the strength, whatever strength he does have.
Well, I think being bound to the land and the whole notion of travel
is by his father, not bound to the land.
He's bound by his father, and he's the boundaries are really the land. He's the only one, as Jeremy said, doesn't traverse any boundaries. He only traverses regions within the land itself, and ends up, as we see in in the Hagar territory, in the Ishmaelite territory. Let's just go
Wait,
back.
can I just say one thing? One thing real quick about it? He doesn't want to see these people. I think it's interesting because, of course, as you said correctly, at the very end of Genesis 22, we get the genealogy of his brother Nahor, and this passage here stresses, brings home that they're going to Ir Nahor. I just was studying with my bar mitzvah girl this week, and she wrote it to our Torah, and she said she goes to the city called Nahor. I said, no, it's not. It's not the city called Nahor. It's the person. They're going to the city of the person named such and such. And so I think that's a powerful element here that Abraham has perhaps got some jealousy or ambivalence. But the Akedah story ends off with the generations of Nahor, and then Abraham, through the person of Rebekah, remarries together. So Rebekah is his grand niece, and so therefore Isaac's first cousin once removed. I think there's a kind of reconciliation passage that goes in this remarriage into the family of Abraham's brother Nahor.
I'll tell you, I have a little bias here, and the reason why I have a bias is the word misham, lakachta isha livni misham, from there, and the word sham is used sometimes in a disparaging way to refer to Egypt. When it makes reference to Egypt, it's always misham, misham. Of course, I may be reading too much into it, but I get the feeling that it's like, the way that our European immigrants came, especially the survivors, right? I mean, it literally, for them, it was also misham. They were coming from there, and they were in no rush to go back there. The ones who ended up here, of course, and for many of them, they never wanted to set foot on the soil of their ancestral land again. And so it makes me think, what transpired there in order for him to not want to go back, to never want to see. We know that he buried his father, Terach, and that the chronology works out that he must have had to go back, right? It happened before the Akedah. But still, the text doesn't say this. And it leaves us to believe, yeah.
There's a tension in this parsha between family and the land.
Yeah.
And it has to be worked out. So Abraham doesn't want Isaac to marry a local, so he has to bring a family member here, here being Canaan on one hand. On the other hand, Isaac has to stay in Canaan because, he's the Sabra. And there is no Yeridah yet.
Yeridah. So let's talk about the well, the scene at the well. And the servant, who we call Eliezer, has made this kind of ordeal, this test, right? He says, he says, with the text here, Adonai. Yeah, it's verse 12. Adonai Elohei Adoni Avraham, God of my Lord of my father, of my master Abraham, make it happen for me. Aseh chesed im Adoni, give him graciousness. I am going to be at the well, or at the fountain. Uvenot anshei ha'ir yotzot lishov mayim, and the girls are coming out to draw water. V'haya hana'ara asher omar eleh hatina kadech, and to the young maiden to whom I will say, lower your jar for me, and I will drink. And says to me, drink, and I will also provide water for your camels. That's the woman that you are designating for your servant Isaac, and that's how I'll know that you did a kindness with my master. Okay, so
I love the way you translated, by the way. Adonai Elohei Adoni Avraham Hakrena. You translate as "make it happen for me," which is exactly right.
What is it? Make it happen.
This is great. This is exactly right, and it is a test. It is audacious, and it is like just the tone of that is so outrageous. Make it happen, big guy. I'm counting on you.
Make it happen. You know what? But it's what's so lovely about it, and here, I love this. it's what makes the Torah great. It's such great storytelling. It's such great, it's just a rich language. And what he's saying is, what's the measure here? I just want to see some kindness. I don't care how brilliant she is. I don't care how beautiful she is. I don't care about anything else. Just I want her to be kind.
Well, because that's what you can't see right away. Because Rebecca, as we know, is described as being beautiful,
Right.
and you see that right away, right? Most of the time when we recognize someone as being beautiful, we're looking at them
Yeah.
and we know right away. What their inner beauty is, we don't know until they do something.
Sheker achein, ve'hevel hayofi.
Yeah, I was thinking of a different verse. It's similar vein. When Shmuel goes to pick out David, Shmuel just picks out the taller, handsomer brothers, and God says, Adam yirela einayim, v'Adonai yirela libav. God, people see with their eyes, but God sees all the way through to the heart.
Okay, so she comes out. He's at the well in the very next verse practically, and he makes all the camels sit down, and in fact, he just runs up to her and it says, "Give me a sip from your jar," and it's a very intimate scene, and it's reading it closely, there's a lot to glean out of it, but. He then kind of slaps on two, golden bands on her.
Actually, just pause on that real quick.
Good.
First of all, I'm giving. I really like what this week's Bat Mitzvah girl, Zion Bennett. Mazel tov to you and your family, to Roger and Vanessa. What she did with this, because she's giving a Dvar Torah about ulterior motives and Lavan's ulterior motive. She speculates. Rebecca sees a guy, 10 camels. And she says to herself, which person in the market should I be helping out here? This guy's got 10 camels. That guy over there's got 2 skinny goats. I'm helping out this guy with the camels. a little cynicism, perhaps. But I just want to say that what the guy does, what Eved Abraham does, by the way, he doesn't slap the bracelets on her just yet. He takes the bracelets and says, Bat mi'at.
Yeah.
Whose daughter? So he's waiting. He holds out the gold and he wants to know about the familial connection, and then he slaps it on.
Right, because he has to actually find a descendant of Terach.
Yeah.
Right, he can't. But the other thing that is interesting about her picking the guy with the 10 camels is that I think, and this becomes clear at the end of the story, that Rebecca is really eager to get out of her ancestral land too. And that really, I think, is part of her greatness, is that in a sense, the servant is saying to her, Lachi lach, and just as God said to Abraham.
Well, that lines up with Jeremy and like it's Abraham, Rebecca, and Jacob,
Yeah, and she's ready.
She's ready, and truthfully, when they ask her and they say to her, "Are you willing to go?" and she says, "Elech," there is a certain
which we really should translate, "I'm gone."
I'm gone.
She's already taken the step out.
Right. Well, she wants to dissociate herself from her ancestral land as well, and that makes her quite sympathetic to Abraham. It also makes her an ideal wife for Isaac, because in a way she fulfills a lot in her character that Isaac is missing in his parents, especially his mother. His mother is dead. And we're running out of time. We got to run to that precious verse at the end of the story where it says that he marries her, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it says, Vayivieha Yitzchak ohela Sara imo. He brought her into his mother's tent. Vayikachet Rivka. He takes Rivka, but the Hilali Isha, she becomes his wife. Vayehaveha, and he loves her. Vayinachem Yitzchak acharei imo, and he is comforted after his mother. And it doesn't get much more, passionate and emotional than that. It's a very emotional moment, the marriage, and we understand what the text is saying here, that in some way the wife becomes the comfort for the tremendous trauma and loss that he has in his life. He's He doesn't have a father, really. That relationship is broken. His mother is dead. His brother is away. He's got nobody, really. And now he has a woman who's beautiful, who's kind, who's really smart, and he loves her. Do you blame him?
No, but Dr. Freud gets a stab at this parsha too, though.
True. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think that's quite I think that's quite on target. I think there's a great beauty in the restoration to love. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time it speaks of any sort of marital love. The first use of the word love, I think, is Kachna et bincha et yichidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak. Take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, v'lech lecha l'eretz Moriah, and go sacrifice him on the mountain. This is the domestic love, not the love that causes violence, that causes death. This is the domestic love that builds a happy home, and it's just charming. And
there's a book. Meir Shalev has a book of firsts, and you're right. I think the first love is the parental love. But this is
the way you describe the story, Elliot, reminds us of the verse near the end of chapter 2, where Eve is created from the rib, as we conventionally say, of Adam, and it says, because of this, a man leaves his parents' home and cleaves to his wife. And in the story of Isaac and Rebekah, it sort of reverses that, because she comes into his mother's home.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah,
that is beautiful. That is really beautiful, because that Breshit, with it's all Breshit obviously, but the Adam v'Chava, and I think Elliot is the only one of us with the zechut of having a married child, but I think we know from our own lives that, and from the communities that we see, children abandon their parents. They grow up, they live their own lives. Uf gozal, we parents cry when our kids go fly the coop. But here, it's exactly as you said, Barry. This marriage is not created by the child flying the parental coop, but by the new person coming into the nest.
Okay, we got to take at least 1 minute and talk about the coda to this parsha, which is the coda to the Abraham story, and that is Abraham. He's got a lot going on here. Okay, Vayosef Avram vayikach isha u'shma Keturah. He goes at it again. He gets another wife, 140 years old, and he has a woman named Keturah, with whom he fathers 6 children. What up with that?
It's a curious story. And I think the reason why it's curious is because when you ask kids how many children Abraham had, they always say 2. And then when you tell them he actually had 8, they don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And this is what they're talking about, or what we're talking about. And I think, what's interesting to me is that Abraham, for all of his greatness, is also going to father some of the locals that are going to provide so much resistance to his Hebrew, Israelite, Jewish descendants in the course of the Bible and later Jewish history. Most striking, of course, is Midian, which will feature in the book of.
But Moses marries a Midianite, and so what happens is, it's so fascinating that the Levitical descendants of Moses are descended on both sides from Abraham, through Moses and through the Tzipporah. They have two direct lines to Abraham, which kind of makes them interesting.
That's cool. I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that.
All right.
There's one thing that's, first of all, it's beautiful that after everything between them, Yitzchak and Ishmael come together for the burial. I mean, that's this great moment of reconciliation. But there's a funny line here, verse 5. Vayiten Abraham et kol asher lo Yitzchak. Abraham gave everything that he had. Ulibnei pilagshim asher Abraham natan Abraham matanot. But to the children of the concubines, he gave gifts. Okay, so it doesn't mean that he literally gave everything to Isaac, because he did give some things to the Bnei HaPilagshim, but also it I think is a story about what's possession and what's dispossession, because the story of the banishment of Ishmael back last week was Sarah says, no, Isaac has to inherit. Abraham says, you're right, Isaac has to inherit, we got to get rid of this guy. I'm not giving him zero, but I'm not giving him a real inheritance. We're replicating that story here when he says, okay, you guys, I'm going to send you off with some clothes, maybe some nice jewelry, but you have to leave. The real
Yeah,
inheritance
read it's by
was to,
Yishalchem, and he sends them, and so we don't pay a lot of attention to this, but he is in a way doing what he did to Ishmael to these six children again, and he's kind of detaching himself from that, basically to say, look, the land is going to go to, and the covenant goes to Isaac. You guys go off to the land of Kedem, to the Arabian Peninsula, basically, and have it there, and that'll be that.
Right, but what the text is really saying when he gave Isaac everything, it means he gave Isaac his inheritance.
Inheritance.
That is what makes him Abraham. The gifts that he gives to the other children is because they're separate from him. They're not part of his family in the way that Isaac is going to be. I
Yeah.
just want to, there's one curious detail. If I remember correctly, there are only two people in the Bible who lived to be 137. One is Ishmael and the other is Levi. And it made me wonder that if the firstborn, Ishmael, has a priestly aura about him that is recognized in the years of Levi.
Do you want to hear something else that's cool? So Abraham is 140 years old when he marries Keturah, according to this chronology. Who lives for 140 years after the first catastrophic? Job. So I'm making the idea, the linkage here that Job and Abraham are connected in more ways than we think. Abraham has lived 140 years, and with a first life, and now has a second life. Job has had catastrophe in his first life, and now lives a full life of 140 years after that, and is rebuilt. And so Keturah may be, in fact, a way to compensate Abraham for all the difficult problems that he's had. He has companionship. At the very, very least, he has somebody in his life and another family. He's not alone. And I think that there's a message there. He chooses life. He lives a full life. He's a great guy. We love him.
Another message there is that then you have to read the 6 additional children as compensation for the children that Abraham lost, which would be both Isaac and Ishmael.
Indeed.
And we often don't think about Ishmael as being one of the lost children.
Fine, but then he loses all 6 too. But that's the end of his life. They don't come back for the burial, by the way, the 6 that he lost. It's just Isaac and Ishmael. Wow, we're left with so many questions and so many puzzles, but it's, we're going to say goodbye to Abraham. We miss him already. But it's been wonderful to think about him over these last couple of weeks, especially this Shabbos. And we want to wish everyone watching, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And from all of us, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Enjoy.